What if I told you one of the best Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles games in years didn't launch as the version it was always meant to be? Sometimes a game has a great idea but gets held back by technical limitations. Other times, it evolves through updates until it finally reaches its full potential. And after spending plenty of time with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Splintered Fate on Nintendo Switch 2, I honestly believe that's exactly what happened here. Welcome back to Smash and Play, where we help you decide what's worth playing. Today, we're jumping into the sewers of New York to find out if this roguelite adventure has finally become the definitive TMNT experience. Right from the start, Splintered Fate feels like a classic Ninja Turtles story. Splinter has disappeared, mysterious portals are opening across New York City, and the Foot Clan is causing absolute chaos. Naturally, it's up to Leonardo, Raphael, Michelangelo, and Donatello to save the day, with help from familiar faces like April O'Neil and Metalhead. The story isn't trying to reinvent TMNT lore. And honestly, it doesn't need to. Its job is to give you a reason to keep fighting through run after run, and it does exactly that. The real star here isn't the narrative, it's the gameplay. If you've played games like Hades or other popular roguelites, you'll feel right at home. Every run throws you into a series of randomly generated rooms packed with enemies, environmental hazards, and powerful bosses waiting at the end. When you eventually get knocked out, and trust me, you will, you head back to the turtle lair, spend the resources you've collected, unlock permanent upgrades, and jump right back into another run. It sounds familiar, but Splinter Fate has a secret weapon: the turtles themselves. Each one feels genuinely different, and that's something I appreciated far more than I expected. Leonardo is a balanced all rounder. If you're new to the game, he's probably the easiest turtle to start with because he feels comfortable in almost every situation. Raphael is exactly what you'd expect: aggressive, fast, and constantly rewarding players who like getting up close and dealing massive critical damage. Michelangelo brings speed and crowd control into the mix. His attacks flow together beautifully, making him incredibly satisfying whenever you're surrounded by enemies. And then there's Donatello. Personally, I found him one of the most interesting choices because his gadgets and defensive options completely change the rhythm of combat. He rewards patience and smart positioning rather than pure aggression. What's impressive is that these differences don't just affect combat, they completely change how each run feels. And that's exactly what you want from a roguelite. The combat itself is fantastic. Everything feels fast, responsive, and easy to read, even when the screen starts filling with Foot Clan soldiers, explosions, and special effects. Controls are incredibly tight, attacks connect with satisfying impact, and every dodge feels responsive enough that mistakes usually feel like your own rather than the game's. That's important because Splinter Fate isn't an easy game. Bosses, in particular, demand your full attention. You can't simply button mash your way through these encounters. Every major fight rewards learning attack patterns, recognizing safe openings, and carefully positioning yourself around the arena. Some bosses completely overwhelmed me during my first attempts, but after learning their moves, finally defeating them felt incredibly rewarding. And honestly, that's one of this game's greatest strengths. Failure never feels pointless. Even unsuccessful runs teach you something. Maybe you discover a better strategy. Maybe you unlock a permanent upgrade. Maybe you simply become more familiar with a boss. Every attempt pushes you forward. That progression loop becomes surprisingly addictive. Another reason the gameplay stays fresh is the build system. Throughout every run, you'll discover different powers, artifacts, tools, and upgrades that dramatically change your abilities. Sometimes you'll create a build focused entirely on raw damage. Other times, you'll end up with defensive bonuses that let you survive much longer than expected. The best part is that no two runs feel exactly alike. One build might completely dominate an area that gave you trouble earlier. The next might force you to adapt because your abilities work in a completely different way. That unpredictability is what keeps roguelites so addictive. And Splinter Fate absolutely understands that formula. Now, here's where the Nintendo Switch 2 version really separates itself. If you played the original Switch release, you probably remember that performance could be inconsistent. The game aimed for 60 frames per second, but intense battles often caused noticeable frame drops. Combat occasionally became harder to follow, the user interface looked softer than it should have, and stability wasn't always perfect. Thankfully, that's no longer the case. On Nintendo Switch 2, this feels like an entirely different experience. Running at up to 4000 while docked and 1080p in handheld mode, everything immediately looks cleaner and sharper. Character models stand out more clearly. Environments have noticeably better definition, and perhaps most importantly, combat becomes much easier to read. When dozens of enemies are attacking simultaneously, visual clarity matters a lot. Maintaining a locked 60 frames per second makes every dodge, every combo, and every boss fight feel smoother than ever before. I rarely found myself thinking about performance because it simply stayed out of the way, which is exactly what you want. Honestly, This feels like the version the developers originally wanted players to experience. Performance isn't the only reason this edition stands out, though. Since launch, Splinter Fate has received a huge amount of new content. The Casey Jones, Junkyard Jan DLC is easily one of the highlights. Casey doesn't simply swap one weapon for another. His hockey stick based combat style completely changes how you approach fights, rewarding careful timing and positioning instead of mindlessly rushing into combat. The Junkyard environment also introduces fresh enemy encounters and memorable boss battles that expand the overall experience in meaningful ways. Then there's Metalhead. And I absolutely love that the developers didn't treat him like a simple cosmetic addition. Instead, Metalhead becomes the game's first fully ranged playable character. Using blasters, missiles, and unique artifacts, he offers an entirely different way to experience the game. If you've already mastered the four turtles, switching over to Metalhead almost feels like learning an entirely new character from scratch. That's exactly the kind of DLC I like seeing. It genuinely changes how the game plays. The biggest surprise for me, though, was arcade mode. This isn't just another difficulty option. It's designed for players who want faster runs, crazier builds, and much higher intensity. One of its standout mechanics is the Hex Flex system, which gives you incredibly powerful buffs, but always with meaningful drawbacks attached. Suddenly, you're making interesting decisions throughout every run. Do you accept a huge damage boost even if it makes enemies significantly stronger? Do you sacrifice survivability for incredible speed? Those risk versus reward decisions make every arcade mode session feel unpredictable, encouraging experimentation with builds you might otherwise ignore. And honestly, that's brilliant design, because even after dozens of runs, the game continues giving you reasons to come back. Replayability has always been the foundation of roguelites. Splinter Fate understands that better than most. Now, of course, no game is perfect. If you're someone who mainly plays games for long cinematic stories, this probably isn't going to become your favorite TMNT adventure. The narrative exists primarily to support the gameplay loop rather than drive the experience. Randomized runs also mean that some players may eventually feel a little repetition after extended sessions. That's simply part of the genre. But thanks to the different playable characters, evolving builds, permanent progression, DLC content, and arcade mode, I found the variety more than enough to keep me coming back. So, is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Splinter Fate worth buying on Nintendo Switch 2? Without hesitation, yes, buy. Whether you're a longtime TMNT fan, someone who enjoys roguelites, or you skip the original release because of its technical issues, this is absolutely the version to play. The smoother performance, sharper visuals, meaningful DLC characters, excellent combat, and endless replayability transform an already good game into something truly special. My final rating is 9 out of 10. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Splinter Fate isn't just a better version of the original release, it's one of the best modern TMNT games available today. It captures everything that makes roguelites addictive while staying true to the personality, humor, and action that fans expect from the Ninja Turtles. And on Nintendo Switch 2, it finally feels complete. Thanks for watching Smash and Play. If you've already played Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Splinter Fate, let me know which character is your favorite. Are you sticking with one of the original Turtles, or has Casey Jones or Metalhead become your new main? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Leave a like if you enjoyed the review. Subscribe to Smash and Play for more Nintendo Switch 2 reviews, gameplay, and honest impressions. And don't forget to follow us on social media so you never miss our next upload. Until next time, keep gaming, keep having fun, and kawabanga!